Hi, this is Dave with EdgeStar Technical Support. Today we're going to be talking about the KC2000 single tap kegerator. We'll go over basic assembly, parts, instructions, installation, and maintenance. Alright, so this is our KC2000 kegerator assembly. As you can see here, we've unpacked it from the box. And I'm going to show you what comes in, packed into the kegerator. Some of these things do not actually get packaged in here. I've done that just for simplicity for the video's purpose. So initially we're going to see the unit itself when we unpack it, and as you well know, they are double boxed. You have an outer box and then the inner box for the kegerator itself, and the parts are all self-contained in here. And when you unpackaged your unit, you had some other parts that were packaged between the inner and outer box. So we're going to go through all of that. And in this next segment, then we'll actually get into assembly. So it's important to know what comes in the box and what you have that you're working with. Secondly, speaking of boxes, I want to make sure that you understand that when you unpack these, if for some reason we come across some sort of a defect, and we hope that we don't, but we want to make sure that we keep all the boxes in the packaging, and that we also try to keep it all in good shape, because we have to use that in the rare event that we have to send one of these back, which we certainly don't want to see. So just keep that in mind. Initially also, when you unpack this unit, you're going to notice it's covered with tape. There's a ton of tape on the outside. I've removed a lot of it. I haven't removed all of it. Most of the tape that I have here is on the inside. But the door is taped shut. The upper plug back here for the tower is taped shut. And most of the stuff inside is secured with tape. Obviously that's in shipping. We don't want that stuff bouncing around. So you just need to make sure that you remove all the tape. And you'll also see here there's a cover over the EdgeStar logo. You can remove that or leave that in place. Frankly, it looks better with it removed. But I'm going to go ahead and open up the door now. I'm going to show you what's going on inside. And then in the next segment, like I said, we'll get into assembly. So I'm going to open up this door. And you'll notice the first thing here is that the inside of the door actually has a curve to it. I'll get into that a little bit later, but there's a reason for that, and that's because of keg fit. We'll get into that here in a little bit. So let's go ahead and continue. First thing you're going to see is the tank. Now the tanks, this is a standard 5-pound CO2 cylinder, and this is actually packaged in the outer box. These are shipped empty. They have no gas in them. What you'll have to do is go to your local gas supplier and get a supply of CO2. We'll get into that a little bit later. So I'm going to set these items here so that we kind of have a bit of organization on how we do things. The next box here we have is going to be our CO2 holder and the drip tray and our casters. We'll get into that. Your drip tray is in here along with your casters. Again, I'm going to show you these individual parts. I just kind of wanted to show you, just give you a bird's eye view. So let's move on to the next box. And in this box, we're going to have our tower and our coupler and our instructions. And again, we'll get into that in the next segment. Back here in the back and right here in the front, this is our drip rail. I'll actually unpackage it here in a little bit. We'll get a better view, but this is how it looks when it comes out of the kegerator. Again, it's all covered in sheathing, but we're going to remove that. Now the last box that we have in here, this is our CO2 bottle holder, and it comes by itself in this box. And here it is. So that's where the bottle sits. That hooks onto the back of the unit by means of these 4 keyhole slots. There's keyhole slots in the back of it. I'll turn it around for you. There's actually 4 of them. Now those keyhole slots are already pre-drilled, tapped, and set up and ready to go on the back of the unit. That'll be one of the last things that we're going to do once we get into setup. Now inside this unit, you're going to have some packaging that you need to remove. And as you can see, there's lots of this blue tape. Make sure that you get rid of it before you start getting anything in here. And make sure that you clean any residue off. You can use 409 or simple green if you have to, if it leaves any residue. I doubt that you're going to have an issue with that, but it's helpful to know it anyway. Up here also you're going to have some foam, and these shelves are all taped in here as well. And again, that's all to just prevent shifting during transit. So we're going to pull this foam out of here, and remember, I highly suggest that you save this stuff when you unpack the unit. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and remove everything. And by the way, here's your owner's manual, some of your plugs for the top cap, and then a gasket that comes with the unit for the tower. We'll get into that when we start the tower assembly, but that is your owner's manual that comes with the unit. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to remove all this tape, because ultimately we're not really going to use these shelves with the kegerator assembly. If you were using it as a normal fridge, which you could do, then you would reinstall the shelves. So don't throw the shelves away, just put them in a safe spot, and if you want to use it later for this purpose, you can do that. And again, as you can see, these are actually slotted, so you could put these just about anywhere in here, but for now we're going to go ahead and take them out. And by the way, when you take these out, they actually have little slots in here on the edges. And if you'll notice, like your oven has a spot in it where the rack actually sits in a groove, these are kind of the same way. So you're going to pick it up a little bit and then just pull them out. And that'll take care of that. A couple of other things to go over here real quick is that we have our kick plate in the bottom of this unit. I'm going to pick that up and show you what that looks like. So this is our kick plate. And our kick plate has to be installed in the unit in order for the keg to fit, because we have to raise up the bottom of the keg to match that curve in the door I was talking about earlier. We'll get into that once we finally set the keg in place. Inside of here, obviously now we have a bare unit. I'm going to talk a little bit about the inside. Back here in the back, this metal plate, that's the evaporator. That's where all the refrigerant flows. On occasion, you're going to find that you have to defrost this unit. They may build some ice or frost up on this plate, and it could be anywhere on this plate. Primary importance, do not use any tool of any sort to defrost that. Don't use a scraper, screwdriver, or anything that resembles that. If you need to defrost the unit, if it builds up a little bit of ice, fine. Unplug the unit from the wall, stuff some towels down here in the bottom, and let Mother Nature do her thing. If you scrape that, those plates are really thin. And what can happen is you'll poke a hole right through it, you let all the gas out, and we have a ruined unit because we really can't replace that evaporator. It's not really something that you can replace as a customer. It would be left to a professional. So we want to avoid that. Up here in the top, you'll see your thermostat 1 through 6. And occasionally we may have to adjust this thermostat. We'll get into that here in a little bit later. Once we get everything set up and we're ready to roll with it, we'll talk about that some more. So that's the inside of the unit. In our next segment, we'll go ahead and start assembly. Okay, so in preparation for our next step, which is to actually put the components inside the kegerator and get that set up, I wanted to give you a bird's eye view of what comes in these boxes. Now, it looks like there's a lot here, but there really isn't. So I'm going to talk about each part, where it goes, what it does. So first thing here you can see, this is our drip tray. This comes packaged in one of the boxes. This actually goes on top of the kegerator, underneath the tap. It's one of the last things we put in. It's a nice touch. It catches the excess beer flow. And it looks nice too. But that's the last thing that we're going to install. And it just sits on top. Our next item here is a really funny looking tool. This is our tap wrench. And we'll get into that here in a little bit once we start talking about the tower and we get ready to install it. This installs our actual tap head to the top of the tower so that we can pull on it and we get beer. So that's what we use to tighten up to the tower. We'll get into this a little bit later as well. Speaking of pulling beers, this is our tap. So normally you'd have your handle here, and they give you a handle that's in another bag. And by the way, these are kind of a universal thread, so if you want to put one of those fancy tap handles on there, something that has a catchy slogan, whatever you want, you can do that. You're not confined to the handle that we give you. So, and again, this just pulls back and forth and we get beer. But we'll talk about that once we get ready to get the tower together. And it comes packaged in these little bubble bags. Next thing here is a set of really long screws with some bolts and a funny looking rubber gasket with some holes in it and our tap handle. Now, on the single tap kegerators, not all of this stuff gets used. These big long screws and these nuts underneath, they don't get used. You're going to have them left over. But we're going to use the gasket, we're going to use the handle. We'll get into that here in a little bit. This is our coupler. And by the way, this is for American beers only. There are other couplers out there on the market. The retailer sells a wide variety of different taps to be used with different beers. But most of the time people drink Budweiser products, things like that, where this will actually fit. But there are some German beers and some other ales where they will not. And for those, you need to consult with the retailer and make sure that you get the correct coupler so that you have the right one when you get ready to put the keg in. If you put the wrong one in, it might fit, but it won't draw any beer out because the stem down here isn't long enough, and we'll talk about that. Stainless steel clamp, you can use this on either the beer line or the gas line, it doesn't really matter. We put that in there just for extra security. If you find that you don't need it, you don't have to use it, but it's there. It's a good thing to have. Let's talk about our regulator for a minute. These are a single gauge regulator. There's two different styles. The only difference is the knob. So to operate these, you actually have to pull the knob out just slightly to disengage it from the lock, and you would adjust it here, and then you'll close it up to lock it in place. And then this threads onto the tank, and then your airline for your CO2 goes here, and this is your secondary shutoff for the CO2 flow. We also give you extra gas line for your gas, standard issue clear vinyl tubing, 2 red plastic clamps, and these will be used to secure the ends of the lines so we don't leak gas. And for a lot more detail, there is a manual that's included here. Gives you the basic setup, kind of a diagram of how it's done. We'll go over it, but it's handy to have as a secondary reference. And then last but not least, we have our tower. The tower is pre-threaded for the line on the coupler with this integrated piece here. Do not cut or modify this in any way. And there's also in these packages, there's a little tiny black washer that goes right inside of there, and it seals that flat spot up against the coupler. And it's packed in your bags here with these gaskets. So make sure you don't lose it. If you lose it or it's missing, you need to contact customer service so we can get you a replacement. This tower has locking lugs. They lock into the top of the tower. There's a gasket that goes in here. I'll show you that. And then this piece, when you're done, slides down over. It's a trim piece and it hides everything. And then of course our tap installs in here. And right in here is where we're going to need to use that tool. We'll talk about that. I'm also going to pop the top of this tower off. We're going to talk about that as well in the event that you have to adjust this. But we'll get into that here in a little bit. And then of course we have our CO2 tank. Again, they are shipped empty. They have no gas in them. You need to get this through air gas or somebody else that has welding chemicals or welding gases, and they should be able to fix you up. Speaking of gas, and I talked about it earlier, this is the older style regulator. They don't have that nice big handle on them. So what you do, there's a lock nut here. You're going to loosen that up and spin this with a flat blade screwdriver to adjust your pressure here on the gauge. And then you'll spin that lock nut tight, just snug it up, and that keeps the regulator from backing out and changing pressures on you. Most of them will have the gray handle. There are some of them out there that do not. And this is what they look like when they do not have that gray handle. So in our next segment, we're ready to start putting this thing together. Hi, this is Dave with EdgeStar Technical Support. Today we're going to be talking about the KC2000 single tap kegerator. We'll go over basic assembly, parts, instructions, installation, and maintenance. Alright, so this is our KC2000 kegerator assembly. As you can see here, we've unpacked it from the box. And I'm going to show you what comes in, packed into the kegerator. Some of these things do not actually get packaged in here. I've done that just for simplicity for the video's purpose. So initially we're going to see the unit itself when we unpack it. And as you well know, they are double boxed. You have an outer box and then the inner box for the kegerator itself. And the parts are all self-contained in here. And when you unpackaged your unit, you had some other parts that were packaged between the inner and outer box. So we're going to go through all of that. And in this next segment, then we'll actually get into assembly. So it's important to know what comes in the box and what you have that you're working with. Secondly, speaking of boxes, I want to make sure that you understand that when you unpack these, if for some reason we come across some sort of a defect, and we hope that we don't, but we want to make sure that we keep all the boxes in the packaging, and that we also try to keep it all in good shape, because we have to use that in the event, the rare event, that we have to send one of these back, which we